everybody. I am Haley Mitchell-Haugen. I'm the editor of Sheila-Na-Gig Editions and Sheila-Na-Gig Online. And tonight we are celebrating the publication of Rebecca Brock's The Way Land Breaks, one of our most recent titles from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. Really excited to be here and hear these amazing poems. And Rebecca will be followed by a number of open mic readers from our summer edition of Sheila-Na-Gig Online. So very excited to have you all. I'm going to introduce Rebecca just by reading her bio, give you a little background. In 2022, Rebecca Brock won the Comstock Review's Muriel Craft Bailey Memorial Poetry Contest, the Kelsey Women's Poetry Contest, and Sheila-Na-Gig Online's Editor's Choice Award. Her work has been recognized and honored by Cutthroat, a Journal of the Arts, River Heron Review, and Whale Road Review. Her chapbook, Each Bearing Out by Kelsey Books in 2022, was a semifinalist at the 2021 New Women's Voice Contest at Finishing Line Press. Her nonfiction essay, about being a working flight attendant on 9/11 was published in Three Penny Review, and she earned her pushcart honorable mention for that essay. I'm always blown away when, the poets work in multiple genres, because I don't do that. And I should mention that she also holds an MFA in fiction from Bennington College. She's been a flight attendant for most of her adult life and says she's still surprised by that fact. She was born in Idaho. She lives in Virginia with her family, but she often takes them westward as often as she can. As you see in some of the poems from this book, lots of travel and place-based works that you will enjoy. You can find her work at RebeccaBrock.org. Rebecca, so excited to see you again. Welcome.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you, everyone, for coming, especially the other readers. I'm so glad you're here and excited to hear your poems. And Haley, as always, just for all the encouragement and for being my guide through this whole process. I just really appreciate you and all you're doing for poets and poetry. I see a lot of beloveds in the room, so thank you, everyone who came. I'm gonna start with the poem I've read before, but I think it's a good place to start for this collection, which is about land and distance. And it's called Bora Peak Earthquake, 1983. They didn't mean to frighten me. I was 8 and thought my thick-lensed, pink-rimmed glasses had gone off. The earth, solid but also liquid, the grown-ups at a loss. Our parents already at work, my little sister and I at the neighbors, the man hollering at us to get outside, the woman shouting to stay, because the ground might open wide, might swallow us. And I saw how their driveway would crack like a prehistoric egg of soil and stone. Again, my sister called, again, thinking it fun, the ride of it, the shake the earth was giving us, like a horse losing patience with the bridle or the buzzing bodies of the flies. I didn't know then how it always feels like that when you are grown. The push to stay and shelter in place, or the pull to venture out, to take the risk of street and sky, all along your indecision, the solidness of things shifting. Thank you. Thank you. I write about my mom a lot in this book, as well as being a mother. And one of the things we lived with as a family was my mom's diagnosis as a diabetic when I was fairly young. And so it's in a lot of these poems, this autoimmune diseases often infiltrate parts of life that you don't always expect. So this next one is called, I Used to Think My Mother Was a Miracle. Her smile pretty, without lipstick, and my father, his face falling back to normal from the deep lines. The way he'd hold her against him like something without bones and say, damn you. It was always surprising us, happening in the middle of a movie or just after dinner. Her sugars plummet, my father's call for juice or honey. We didn't always have to go to the hospital in the middle of the night in our pajamas. but sometimes she'd clamp her lips like a child refusing. I used to wonder where she went, how far away a person can be from someone else. When her sugar came up enough, she'd look at us like we were brand new pennies, shining there for her. Oh, hi, sweethearts. I didn't know you were all here. And then we'd barely stop to wipe our eyes or breathe or figure out what we had to do next. Even Dad would start to crease around his eyes. We were like people in a movie when the car almost drives off a cliff. For a little while, beneath us, we'd felt air instead of ground. Thank you, guys. This next poem, as if we do travel a lot back and forth across the country, and one of our favorite places to stop is the Badlands National Park. It's just a place I love. And we were there once and heard a park ranger talk about geologic unconformities. And it's this idea of when two rock formations are on top of each other from different time periods, but the time period between them is missing. So it's this gap, and it just struck me and stuck with me. So I haven't been able to read this poem at a reading before. So it's called Geologic Unconformity. This mountain, this erosion of a mountain against my palm. The warm stone arcs like a dollar store puzzle that fits, but barely holds. I ask my son, what was it? It meant absence, it meant gap. He sighs from the depths of his new voice, recalls the park ranger from yesterday. Geologic unconformity, Mom. And I remember how it felt like something I already knew, that record of no record, an accounting of absence equal to years, millions more by millions than we have even been wandering here. This is the year I watch my son's shoulders gain even height with mine. Silver strands of hair among my brown recall my grandfather, his auburn hair, and how it turned white over the course of one night. How this is told as some measure of his immeasurable loss, his gap between times. One night, a young enough man went to sleep, and when he woke, he was old. I don't know what happens to a person between one thing and the next, how it holds through bones, beneath skin, a striated measure of when and how the heart gives out, or how it changes cadence, changes shape. Here, a grandfather and the boy he never met who carries his name, and a woman suddenly me, letting go strands to glint and tangle stone or wind, all of it telling how not one of us can stay. Thanks, God. Thank you. And this is another landscape one where the landscape and the person had sort of blended into one. It's called I Remember How I Believed. For so long, I imagined life a before and after of some terrible disaster, as if that's how I would be defined. I was this, and now I'm that. A sometimes Presbyterian raised among Mormons, a family of Jehovah's Witness next door, always the end of times, always something coming, grasshoppers and heat and days of summer, time turning weeks, turning years I couldn't stop. My mother sick all through, her first baby buried in the foothills under a western white pine. As a child, I imagined I could crawl into those foothills, beast creatures, sleeping old ancient, turn around twice between hill rise and settle, nose to tail, tucked against that pale brown rise. There, even grown, I half want to see it wake. The wind quicks as if it knows what I want and don't want. Every June, I watch my father clear the baby's headstone with water from the cemetery pump. He traced the cursive O of our, the D of darling, and I remember how I believed that line would be solid between then and now, what was and what now will be. Sometimes, after driving for days or hiking for hours, the distance of being stretched between here and home, I can't tell which one of us is breathing. Thank you. And I knew I had to do one flight attendant poem. I have somehow been a flight attendant for almost 25 years. I still really don't know how that happened, but it's allowed me a really good life. So this poem is called The Flight Attendant Looks Back. Even though you arrive, you're never quite home. Life lands unexpected. Here, rain looms heavy, days thick with leftover wet, sudden deluge. You miss not how the rain falls or how it smells, but how you could see it fall, from what distance. You know you went too far, wanting departure, connection, a certain way of smiling. You left expecting too much. You recall now the scent of rain on dry earth, a storm well ahead above an open stretch of high desert. How sometimes rain evaporates before it reaches ground. All right, and I'm rearranging just a little bit for certain requests. So, but first I'm going to read, I promise it's a good order. This is another poem I read a lot, and I just can't seem to get away from it. It captures so much of what I tried to do with this book. And it was one of the first poems Haley took for Sheila-Na-Gig. It's called Expanse, Immensity, Collapse. When did time start? My son asks, looming at 4 a.m. The animal in me startles, cries out, his face so close and sudden in the dark. It's only a moment that I don't know him, but it's the kind of thing he asks. He could mean the tick of the clock, his knowledge of bedtime, time to wake up, or he could mean his own beginning. Burdened with a restless mother, he understands distance is a thing to measure. How much longer, Mama? Between here and there, and when we are on our way toward home again. Already he's unearthed stories of stonefish in a Wyoming desert, of cliffs in Nova Scotia scored with prehistoric trees, an Oreodont skull in South Dakota. He knows that rocks themselves have ages. He might have been asking about old human things, temple gods and sacred rites, lost cities. He's raised his brother around ancient mounds in Ohio, walked undulations of an earthen serpent's twists and turns, once aligned with moon, sun, and steady seeming stars. Do you hear that? He asks, after I've coaxed him back beneath the covers, snuggled down beside him, a sound like clanging pipes, like a radiator we don't have, shudders. And I rise to look out the window, turn to tell him it is only hard rain. There are at least two ways to measure a life, the human one and the universe's grander score of expanse, immensity, collapse. I lie awake to the wash of it. Thank you. Amanita phalloides. The mushroom, white, stunning, and suddenly there, near our house in a town between the 7-Eleven and the vet clinic, not out in the dark woods, not even down by the creek that sometimes broke its banks, just there, by where we were always walking, a bulbous umbrella, waiting like a Cheshire cat or a caterpillar with a face, the boys at that age of chub and wonder. I used my phone to catch what I could, their curious heads bending low, just above the wide dome of its rounded top, that landlocked jellyfish afloat, air instead of sailing. My youngest reached out and picked it. I remember wincing at the brokenness. Things were always breaking those days. They didn't walk anywhere, but ran and crashed and hollered so often I couldn't put things back into any sort of order. I wish now I'd let more be, and I must have wished that a little then too, because I asked him to show me, and his brother turned to help him hold it. Its head too big now, its stalk was snapped, wobbling the way their heads did not so long ago when I carried them everywhere. And then I heard the neighbor, hands pocketed, head at a tilt, ask, "What you got there?" He was so calm, a naturalist who knew the names of things. What is it called? I asked, or might have. But he said to go ahead and put it down, to have the children wash their hands, maybe even change their clothes. He spoke slow to me and gently, and so I didn't jump at first. It dawned slowly, and then I moved the way mothers do. And for those that don't know, the Amanita phalloides is the death cap mushroom. So I should have said that first. I am going to jump to the further end of the book so I don't take too much of everyone's evening. This next poem is dear to me, and there's so much beneath it. I'm sure all you writers know that's not in the poem, but's in it, in the body of it, that even if it's not in the words. But suffice to say, this is for a very dear and very brave friend, and a really hard time we all went through for a couple summers. This one is called Tammy Calls from Walmart. She must have her headphones on. I can hear the background music and other shoppers and her cart with the bad wheel that rattles and follows her through the aisles, maybe vegetables or frozen dinners, easy to cook. Soon, eventually, all her husband will be able to eat is mashed potatoes or mac and cheese. I listen to her doing the things we do and call living. Dish soap, maybe socks, surely alcohol. We talk like we are good at ice skating. Straight sentences push us along evenly or accidentally aim us right at her husband's ALS diagnosis at 53. I can't even believe what's normal now, she says, and we are through. Wet, struggling, our street clothes pulling us down, our hair plastered to our middle-aged faces, and I have to try to fish her out. Make a joke as I pull and tug her back to Walmart, to the cart with the wonky wheel. My only tool, my voice, and decades of story between us. Of course, all loss is speakable if you learn or remember how to surface. Blue sky or cloudy, it doesn't matter which, not really. Just that it's still there, holding, for now. And anyway, you need groceries, dinner. Someone has to mow the lawn, wash the car, tell the kids. I don't know how, but I'm doing it, she says, from self-checkout, scanning erratic beeps. And I know I'm a hindrance now. Say, I'll call again soon. Feel that woozy sense I've known so often lately, like a thin place. Maybe the top of a mountain, the air there, the view, and all around me, scattershot of boulder, cloud, and tree. Thank you. I felt I needed to read this next one because it is the poem where the title of the book comes from. I'm sure there's a proper name for that I'm forgetting. The title poem. It's called I Broke the Way Land Breaks. And this is another one with so much beneath it. I think that's what I love so much when I pivoted from fiction to poetry is you didn't always have to explain yourself or make it make logical sense. You could just weave away and have it as dense or as feather light as needed. This one's called I Broke the Way Land Breaks. My son asks if I ever feel bad for inanimate objects. And I think of his Nana's house or ours, his own room glutted with junk and treasure. And I wonder, no, I know he will hold on too long to many things and fight his whole life to name what is missing. The world is so big, buddy, I want to say. Some things get a little lost. Even eating dinner, he paces, pops up and down, that mind a ricochet, his brother and dad and I numb on screen time. Sure, sometimes I shake my head like a horse buzzed by something it cannot name besides the buzzing. These pandemic years have worn me like a sock with a sudden hole, the floor cold and my skin pushing through. I have wandered through all this trying and forget how to name space for what is here. It's not all my fault. The world is wild with tear and teeth, with weeping, and I am weaker than I expected. I broke the way land breaks, my soil stone and sun cracked by too much at once. Whether she said it or not, I remember my mother asking me to not be so hard. I looked elsewhere then, too, propelled out, seeking heat, seeking rain and light, the whole storm. Kiddo, I should tell him, kiddo, it's easy to confuse what we love, what we need to love, what needs our love. We are only creature, near enough animal, near enough plant, near enough gone. Thank you. I just have two more. Is that about good, Haley? We good? Okay. I'm gonna go back to another one I haven't read. I'm sorry about my voice tonight, guys. All right, I moved things around. Let me find it. Here we go. Okay. This one I wrote, it's one of those after poems, and I wish I'd thought to bring the poem, but it's Cotton Candy by Edward Hirsch. And so this poem is after that poem. And it connects back to my mother and home, and it's called Marshmallows. We set up camp at the base of the sawtooths, near where my grandfather once loved to fish. And my sons ate marshmallows toasted warm, saving the burnt ones for their grandmother, a diabetic who shouldn't have eaten one, but ate three with great praise, savoring the residue on her fingers and the grin of my youngest who says he is a chef and begged her to eat just one more. I don't even like marshmallows, but found myself eating one just because mountains and starlight and campfire, and my father, my mother, my boys all here. The way they look at her and she them is still an unexpected thing. And I know the mountains rise up behind us and the coyote howls far off. And in the morning, we will take the boys out onto the lake that was once red with salmon, that is named still for those salmon. And we will find things to do that are easy, that let her sit still or walk only a few steps down to the dock, onto the boat, and she will radiate that sweetness that is her secret. My boys, bigger now and busy, constant, will nestle in beside her and find stillness, find home. The sweet will kill her, her body undoing itself, but she won't disappoint them. One more, she will say, just one more. And I just felt like I needed to finish with the final poem. It's called Raising Glaciers. If you look, you can trace the path of us. Measure snowpack with your eyes, before, and now streams weep down mountain waterfalls. The face of stone scarred and pocked and jagged. No change goes smoothly. I have been trying to show my sons how to name loss. And is it betrayal to give them such language in a world shifting toward flashpoint and heat? What else is it to be human? I run out of words to answer their gaze, drive them to mountains, give them landscape, offer this disappearing world as if it is one long gasp of oh and ah and see. Do you see? I am raising glaciers, lost causes, boys with two soft hearts who know not to take stones or approach wildlife, who know how to name what is here, what is lost if we can't name it. Maybe the earth knows the sun is too much and anyway catches all the light it can. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just wow, Rebecca. Thank you. I know I'm not the only one who could just sit back and listen to you read the entire book to us. So thank you. Just such a treat to hear you, and such beautiful, moving poems. So such an honor to be able to publish The Way Land Breaks from Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. You've been listening to Rebecca Brock. We're going to move into our open mic portion of the reading now. We have 5 great readers from Sheila-Na-Gig Online, and we're going to start with George Franklin. Take it away, George.
Oh, thank you, Haley. Rebecca, that was amazing, and you're an impossible act to follow. So, thank you for reading. Um, First poem I'm going to read is one that was published in The Lake, um, I think earlier this year. It's called A Poem About Loss. Years later, I'm writing the same poems. Eden that isn't Eden, the past that was never Eden. Dying of old age isn't simple. At least it wasn't for my parents or their parents. No reason to think it will be for me either. Last week, I was in a nursing home on a law case. There was a woman 100 years old, deaf and mostly blind, but she wasn't ready to die. A Buddhist monk told me once that we get used to suffering and that after a while we think pain is normal, but it's hard to get used to the world. I remember my oldest son teething at 3 months, crying without pause as I walked him much of the night. I don't know if walking him helped his pain. Maybe it just made me think I was doing something to make him feel better. It was only a few steps on an old wooden floor. I turned at the radiator and walked back toward the door to my bedroom, then back to the radiator. Sometimes we'd walk the room in a circle, and sometimes I'd recite whatever poems I knew by heart. The woman in the nursing home had cancers covering her face. Within a month or two, the worst of my son's teething was over. Sometimes I'm still back in that room, walking him. And the next two poems are going to be in the upcoming issue of Sheila. Such hunger. In my sleep, I hear you shout, Que hambre! But I don't know what hunger you see or feel, or that I only imagine you see or feel. In Galleria Alameda, there was a table piled high with moras, blackberries, and large flies covered them, just as black, almost indistinguishable. A table wet with juice, with moscas and berries. From metal beams hanging above the narrow aisles, there were haunches of cattle, white fat and dark red flesh. What hunger did you mean? We ate fresh mangoes and granadillas. Outside, there were carts, strings of orange chontaduro, the busy streets. Or was it my hunger? Something so large I was swallowed by it, carried like Jonah across an ocean. I'm walking with you somewhere else, maybe Bogota at night, streets that climb up into the hills or loop around so it's easy to get lost. There's a tall man with a dog asking for money. We're trying to get to a place we know, maybe the bright windows of a hotel, or where your sister will pick us up in her car. In the half light of a restaurant, we eat octopus and grilled fish. We're both hungry. I stroke your arm while we wait for the next course. The food overpriced, too elegant to make us full. Afterwards, we return to your apartment for coffee, and I remember 6 years ago when you first invited me for dinner. How much I wanted you, how hungry I was. Reading your poem. Mi amor, I'm reading your poem, The Unmade Bed, about a woman waiting for a man who disappeared, probably taken away to be killed. 40 years ago in your country, that happened to people you knew. You'd hear explosions when you were working at the university. Later, like everyone else, you stopped by the supermarket, bought chicken and rice, and went home to cook dinner. Now you translate the narratives of women and men who are still leaving, as you left, after threats by mail or on the phone. A voice that says they've been tried and sentenced, that part of them will be found by the highway if they're lucky. The war is over now, mostly, but the threats are still there. Paramilitaries still demand taxes. The last guerrillas rule villages far away from the restaurants in Bogota or Cali, or the tourist zip lines near Medellin. At the National Museum, we stood in front of Garay's painting of the Levite's concubine, raped and nude, mouth open, a corpse smeared with dirt. The man staring down at her seemed surprised, his own guilt at having given her to the mob completely forgotten. Garay was no fool. He lived during Civil War, and he knew what he was painting. More than a century later, they're still finding bodies. They're still unmade beds. Thank you.
Should I go? Should I start? Yeah, well, so let me say, George, if you found it difficult to follow Rebecca, I have to follow Rebecca and you. All right. Rebecca, thank you for your poetry. It was amazing. Having traveled for 30 years, over 100 days a year, I want to thank you also for sacrificing to taking care of people like me on airplanes. 3 poems. I will save the one for Sheila-Na-Gig's Fall for next time. So this one is called The Wisdom of Doing Dishes. Endeavoring to find some passion for what I deem mundane, I failed to find room in my heart for this one cast iron pan. The stubborn specks of a burnt pork chop, like barnacles, determined to stick to a ship's hull. Here I am, standing before a sink as deep as the Grand Canyon, staring at a cast iron black hole, wrestling with my ambition to mean something, while the dishes are not done and the garbage bag is full. Obsessed with what is crucial to my destiny, as the mundane goes on playing card tricks, pulling me to expect the King of Hearts, but pulling Kali from the deck, the goddess of dark wisdom. Thank you. Here's one very recent about my dad, with a nod after William Stafford's poem Next Time. It's called This Time, as Old as He Was Then. I'd watch how he looked up and pursed his lips at the edge of whistling when he wanted to end a thought with a precise idea. I'd watch how his eyes settle on the lips that launch a question and chose to be silent, how silence would prevent a war. I watched how elegantly his fingers came to rest on his mouth when he knew it was his time to speak. How his perfectly trimmed mustache would not prepare you for the harshness of his words, particularly if you were his son, especially if he loved you. And this one is an older poem. It's in my book Contraband from last year, and I think it's appropriate given the time of the year. It's called Summer Music. The breeze, the summer, is more austerely rationed than wartime bread. Thank God for the cricket's generosity, filling the stale air with music. July has been uncertain, filled with rumors of mortality, and August has not helped. And my wife carries the worrying for our son like a shroud. The porch is a church tonight, as we respect the dark and choose to light no candles. We have been speaking without a single word, as the sauce simmers, promising the solace of a meal prepared with volunteer tomatoes. And the music tonight comes from small creatures scraping their legs on their bellies like guitars. Thank you.
I think I'm up next. Wow, it's just wonderful to hear all these poems. Thank you to everybody who's been reading. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because the poem in Sheila-Na-Gig was a ekphrastic one. This is a new series that I've been working on with my collaborator, Karen Elias, and we got off on curlews for some reason. And this is the image that she made. She was reading Ali Smith's book, Companion Piece. And the end of the quote that we did several pieces on was, "This book will be the messenger that brings them books full of things God would like them to say." And this is the image that she created. The messenger. I can't see the bottom of this. Of course, it is the curlew, cinnamon and winged, that long-billed bird that sucks nourishment from the earth, forages for earthworms, burrows deep for shrimp and crab in the soft substrates of mudflats, the beige plains of beaches, the uneven terrain of flooded fields, but also in the overflow of script in scriptures, epiphany, the tasty tidbit that tempts it to dig deeper, pull out the squirming, unexpected, unearthed in murky dreams, holy visions, and books. Thin, speckled messengers, transformed from wet dip and jerky strut, it rises over rippling waters, over everyday scribes, over ordinary saints floating nightly in currents misty with prophecies, and the blurry assurance of psalms ebbing toward the foggy edge of consciousness into insight or inspiration from somewhere, from everywhere. And I thought this image just spoke so much to the creative process. So I'm going to read two more pieces that are part of this series that weren't in Sheila-Na-Gig, but Karen is an environmental activist and does a lot of work about some of the things that have been going on recently, including all the wildfires. So this is a piece about a curlew in the midst of Curlew, Washington, which was just a town of about 100 that was destroyed by wildfires. The witnesses. Near the confluence of Long Alec Creek and the Kettle River, the Curlew watches its namesake, town of 100, as residents stare toward the west, inhale fear. Smoke rewrites the sky where the curlew once flew. Flames attack its map and habitat. Ridgelines pulse with what is singed, feathers, pines, mountains, horizons streaked with regret and the burnt promises of those not there to witness. The incineration of branch, the contagion of spark, the long, slow burn of loss. O curlew and curlews, obscure enough to hide once within these safe acres, even you grief has found, even you. And then the last piece, a nod, of course, to Emily Dickinson, hoping for a little bit of hope. Hope is the thing with feathers. The curlew is the thing with feathers, is the beak wildly waving wide ribbons that hold back the strands of storm. That's the thing about curlews, about hope. Red sky in the morning, warning and delight intersecting, flag-like ribbons curling into another day, maybe. The curlew is the thing, even in the middle of a hurricane, even on a fragile bough, while Earth's vast tornado of despair keeps widening, widening. The curlew is the thing with feathers, is the beak wildly waving its frayed but flapping ribbons of persistence, of hope. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Sky widening, widening into curlews, into hope. That's the thing. Thanks very much.
There we go. So I am Laura Ann Reed, and I'm here joining you from Mill Creek, Washington, a small city about 20 miles north of Seattle. And I'm going to be reading 3 very short pieces. All will be in my next chapbook. The first one is called Burning the Lover. I've been thinking about the letters I send to the man in Le Marin, and how, for years, I hear nothing from him. His wife must be burning my words, most likely in the fireplace. He would be close to 80 now, maybe warming his bones the way my grandfather did, turning his back to the flames. The next one is called If Not for the Ghosts. At first, I think it's a small bird stirring in the dogwood, but no, it's only the dead colors falling through what is alive and still ripening. If not for what memory holds, it would be enough to love and die quietly, as do the quails under the bay trees. It's the ghosts that keep me at my desk, learning how to say that being with him was the same as entering a field of wind naked. The third is called Where Words Can't Go. An autumn night, light poured through the cafe's open door. Outside, a waiter moved in shadow with a tray of espressos. I saw a face in profile, a few tables away. The man turned. Want to go dancing? He asked, adding there was a boîte close by, French for nightclub, also for box, as in a shape that contains what is invisible, the story inside what happens. Only the saxophone player knew what to do after the power went out, the slow tunes that danced us through the unlit room. Thank you.
I guess it's me, right? I'm the last one. So if it is difficult to follow each one of you, I have the most difficult task, right? Anyway, so thanks everyone. Beautiful reading, everyone, and all the poems quite moving. So I'm going to read the poem that is in the summer edition of Sheila-Na-Gig. And first I thought, I wasn't sure, but then I thought, you know, with the hurricane, I haven't written a poem yet on the hurricane, but this poem was inspired by the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria that occurred in February, last February. Alive. On the floor, an ant carries a dead ant. Left, right, frantic, unsure where to drop it. On the screen, people carrying injured, dead, all wrapped in grief. Buildings collapsed in Kahramanmaraş. Dust covers all, a shroud, grays out rescuers' bright clothes. A man, orange clad, sits on piled rubble, left hand holding his daughter's hand, her body buried, crushed. At home, I see the photo, the man's gaze. I rush outdoors, run, fill my lungs until they hurt. I look for green shoots pushing through coffee, dark earth towards light, get drunk on colors and air, blue and clouds, egret's flight. 3 days on, a 3-year-old pulled out alive. The next one was also inspired last year by an event. This was the shooting at the Buffalo supermarket, and something along the same line happened recently in Jacksonville. Gunman kills 10 at Buffalo supermarket in racist attack. On May 14, cycling to Santa Cruz, I stopped at the park in Felton, tilted my face up to drink at the edge of the grass. A car door shut, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a blue shirt, his skin polished bronze, black hair in a braid down his back, held a bulldog wearing a harness vest, its legs limp like a marionette's, unable to carry its weight. Is he recovering? A full-faced, half-sword smile flooded the man's eyes, crinkled his face like wind wrinkles sand. No, he's old, has trouble walking, but loves people, so I bring him to the park. He sits and watches, is happy. Children carrying glittered gift bags and balloons streamed by, calling each other, their voices castanets. As the dog was pulling him towards the park's heart, the man beamed, nodded his goodbye, made the sky bluer, the light sharper. My country is where the man with the bulldog lives. His smile was sweet like white grapes when I'm tired and thirsty, warm like the air at noon after the sun has cleared the coastal fog. I should have learned their names. And the last one is from my book, Survival Time, published by Sheila-Na-Gig. And this is one that I actually have never read, this poem, but it's inspired by the time of the year. And it's called End of Summer in Northern California. To those who say our state has no real fall, notice how warmer light paints cliffs ochre afternoon. Walk on roads where pink naked ladies bloom. Run in Redwood Park and watch deer hop among ferns turned brown. Hike Sierra trails strewn with golden leaves showered by quaking aspen. At dawn, crack the frozen stream near your tent. Fog no longer rolls in at day's end, chilling you. See the horizon at sunrise draw a sharp line between ocean and sky. Hear trees exhale in our first rain. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. Always great to have you here, and all our other open mic readers, and Rebecca Brock celebrating the publication of The Way Land Breaks, all from Sheila-Na-Gig Online and Sheila-Na-Gig Editions. Thank you all for being here. You can find more at www.sheila-na-gig.blog.com. Good night, everybody.